As a start, I'd like to take you on a brief journey on how we both met. Because the things that binds us as cellular network researchers is also the things that haunts us as cellular network researchers. And I would categorize that into 4 categories. So the one thing is, you have all these different access technologies. Once a decade, you need to build up a whole new park of equipment and knowledge and software. Then you have all these legacy protocols that the telco industry loves to use, but they're inching closer and closer to more internet-based technologies. We have all these corner cases in the telecom world, especially in cellular networks. For example, 2 operators with completely different hardware, software, and configuration settings are actively trying to mimic a consistent service to you as a roaming customer. We have all this 0 rating corner cases because not all traffic is handled the same, and some is accounted, some is not accounted for. Not necessarily if you have like a data plan that includes streaming or not, but also traffic. There's always some traffic that is allowed even if you don't have any data allowance left, like connecting to the credit card services to pay for more data traffic. We have all these geo-blocked services. But the worst of all is actually the geography. So I actually made a prison because we as a cellular network researchers are always imprisoned within our own country where we might have 2, 3, 4 network operators. And whenever we have an idea, we come up with an exploit, we only can test them against those 3 or 4 network operators. And so a few years back, Gabriel had very neat ideas how to dodge traffic accounting. And he tested this with several Austrian operators. And I was like, we need a solution to get a global picture. How is it with other countries? And so a short example, how can we do measurements and what's the problem? Let's say we have in our toy example, just 3 countries, and each of that has 3 network operators. And now I have one SIM card with an Austrian operator that can connect to my own operator, and in each other country to the 3 roaming partners. However, of course, to get a better picture, we need SIM cards of all the 3 home network operators. And then, of course, there's more than just one data plan with each network operator. And we also want to do the reverse measurements. And so even if in this very small toy example, we end up with almost 190 combinations. And so how do we scale that? And we could either travel a lot, or we had collect all the SIM cards in all the countries and duplicate our setups, and then declare bankruptcy. Or we need to find something new. And so we opted for SIM tunneling, for splitting or decoupling the modem from the SIM card. We're not the first ones to do SIM tunneling over the internet. However, we are academic researchers, so we needed to do that dirt cheap. And so in our setup, we have like our SIM cards mostly in Austria, and then we can virtually connect them to different modems in different countries, and there we can connect them to all the network operators. And we set that up with Linux network namespaces, so basically Docker containers, so that we really get clean, sterile measurements without any background traffic. And so how did we make this cheap? How can we like ship those stations to friends and family and other researchers worldwide? Well, we needed to make it with a Raspberry Pi and with some common Chinese super cheap USB SIM card adapters. And the SIM card was basically directly connected to GPIO pins. We ignored the clock line, for example. We know which modem is in there. We measure it once, hard-coded in software. Don't have to care about that. So that's how we made it dirt cheap. And so we made some measurements with that. One problem that we encountered is that, especially in the roaming case, it can take hours or days until call data records are transmitted to the home network operator and show up. And so we needed a method to check the accounting rules abroad. And so we leveled them up in powers of 2, so that like the first measurement uses 1 megabyte, then 2, then 4, then 8. And so when the traffic accounting arrives hours or days later, we can puzzle it together and know what kind of traffic was accounted and which wasn't. Another interesting thing that we did and encountered was ringback tone fingerprinting. So ringback tone is that tone that you hear when you call someone and before that person picks up. And the interesting thing about that is that it's usually generated by the target operator. So that means if your phone is abroad, the visiting network operator generates that tone. And if you look at the spectrogram, you can see they're kind of different. For example, in O2 in Germany has all the side lobes, but it also has a different center frequency and a different amplitude. And so if we take those and just plot the frequency versus the amplitude, you get a picture where you can clearly see that with just one phone call, we can distinguish where a certain person actually is. Well, we know which operator, and by extension, we know which country, because operators only operate in a specific country. And so, but however, we can take that voice even further. I mean, voice is one of the oldest technologies or modes of operation for cellular networks. And turns out the radio access network isn't the only way to access the core network of an operator or the services of an operator. There's a second method, that's voice over Wi-Fi. And voice over Wi-Fi, I mean, operators love voice over Wi-Fi because they still get full revenue. They can charge you fully for the services, but not provide the last mile. You're paying with your own Wi-Fi router for that. And that's a pretty interesting technology because it also allows us to break out of this geographic prison, because over the internet we can connect to all the other operators that also operate a voice over Wi-Fi gateway. So how does this work? Well, this is the classic way. Your UE, your phone, connects over a base station to the core network, and from there to the voice subsystem of the operator. And your phone has then a SIM card and some configurations, because 3GPP more or less forgot to create an auto-configuration protocol for voice over LTE and voice over Wi-Fi. But we'll come back to that later. And so the alternative way is that the network operator operates an EPDG, which stands for Evolved Packet Data Gateway, and is just a fancy word for an IPsec endpoint. And then your phone can make an IPsec tunnel to this EPDG, connect to the core network, and from there to the voice services of the operator.
Okay, so we're at the lower path here. The packets go from the UE to the EPDG, and they traverse the internet over a Wi-Fi access point. And obviously this Wi-Fi access point is not controlled by the operator, so it's a third-party Wi-Fi access point. Maybe customers are connecting on an airport or on an IT security conference like Black Hat. So obviously it needs to be protected against threats, and therefore it's encapsulated in an IPsec, via an IPsec tunnel. In fact, it's 3 layers of this tunnel. The very first one is an IC layer that is used for signaling and also for management of the subsequent layers, for layer 2, for layer 3. So for the initial key agreement and also for the rekeying, this tunnel is used. Then on layer 2, we have an IPsec layer in tunnel mode. So this means that it's pretty much like a VPN. It gives the customer an IP address within the operator's range. Also, this layer corresponds to the IMS APN on Voice over LTE. And finally, we have the third layer, layer 3, that is used for the Voice over IP traffic, so for SIP and for the actual voice traffic. And yeah, this is secured via IPsec as well, but in transport mode. And when we approach this topic, we simply kicked it off by recording a traffic dump of my phone connecting to my home operator. And this is the result. So this is a Wireshark screenshot. And as we can see, this is an IC packet. It's the handshake packet, so the first IC SA init packet that goes from the smartphone towards the EPDG, towards the operator. And what happens here is that the smartphone, it communicates the target operator which security associations, so which ciphers, for example, it supports. And since this is a handshake packet, the operator will take a look at this packet. It also has some supported configurations, and it will match those configurations from the client against their own one, and then they can agree on mutually supported security associations. What also happens is that the client directly initiates a key exchange. So in this case, my home operator in Austria, it was using Diffie-Hellman key exchange group 2, which is the 1024-bit prime group. And this was not an ideal choice, because since 2015, we know, due to a CCS paper, that an academic team can break 768-bit prime Diffie-Hellman, and nation states can even break 1024-bit prime. And of course, this was 2015. So since then, computers just got faster, and cracking power is cheaper and more easily available. So nowadays, you can say that anything lower than 2048-bit prime modular prime group is considered as not very secure. So yeah, my operator obviously did not make a very good choice here. And also, I want to highlight that the key exchange is very important here. So although we have these other security associations, like supported ciphers, a lot of security depends on the key exchange. Because even like if a very secure cipher is used, if the key exchange is weak, that obviously undermines the overall security of the connection. So yeah, it's very crucial to use a strong enough key exchange here. And yeah, our Wireshark example already looks very suspicious because it's a weak cipher. But this was just one operator. This was just my home operator in Austria. And of course, we are researchers. We wanted to get the global picture. So how do other commercial operators, worldwide operators, behave here? And of course, something that is as well interesting is whether they stick to specification or whether they use, for example, deprecated ciphers. So we also wanted to compare it against the specification. So this brings me to the ETSI-FreeGPP specification slide. In this case, there are multiple specification documents that cover the voice over Wi-Fi part, but ETSI TS133-210 is the most important one here. That's kind of a telling name, so you can see that this is a lot of fun. Sadly, I have to disappoint you because we already did the work, so we are not looking at this specification in detail now. But yeah, we kind of extracted the supported Diffie-Hellman groups over time, so over different versions of this specification document, and this is the result. The most important lines are the red and the yellow one. The red line is the Diffie-Hellman group 2, so 1024-bit prime, that was also used by my operator. It was pretty much the standard for like 10 years until 2011. Then it was discouraged for some years, and finally 2016, maybe as a reaction to the CCS paper, it was deprecated. So the major replacement is 2048-bit prime group that is still considered as the standard. But 1024-bit prime group shouldn't be used anymore. But of course, like this is the shell case. So this is the specification, and we are interested in what happens in practice. So therefore, we had a threefold evaluation approach. And the first step was to take a look at the configuration files that are preloaded and that are present on smartphones. So these are operator-specific configuration files. The second step was to do some penetration testing against the IPsec client that runs on the UE, so on the smartphone. And finally, since every ePDG is exposed towards the internet, we also did some active probing. So this is also, if you compare it to the radio case, this is a huge advantage for us as researcher because we do not need dedicated measurement equipment in every country like we did with Mobile Atlas. But right now, we can scan everything just from Austria, from our server in Austria in Vienna. Let's take a look at the results of the first flank, of the first step. So sadly, there is no good auto-configuration script. So what happened in practice is that operators, or mainly manufacturers, they developed approaches to preload configurations onto the smartphones. And of course, every manufacturer has a different way here. So we tried to cover multiple manufacturers and multiple devices. And for example, for Apple, we were very happy because there was already an implemented solution by Merlin, by another researcher, that allowed to download the corresponding profiles, so the carrier profiles. And we used this GitHub project to download them and then evaluated the voice over Wi-Fi settings there and the key exchange groups that are supported by various operators. For Samsung, it was also pretty straightforward. So this was just an XML file that is sitting on the phone and that can also be extracted from smartphone ROMs, from firmwares. But in the contrary, for Qualcomm, this was not too easy because Qualcomm, of course, uses a proprietary format. So this was an MBN file format, a modem configuration file format that we needed to reverse engineer and that our student assistant, Philipp, gladly wrote a parser for. So we were able to parse these files. And the nice thing was that this approach worked across multiple manufacturers. So as pretty much any smartphone that used a Qualcomm chipset for them, we were able to uncover these configuration files and to use our parse. And then there's also, like for Google Pixel phones, they use a different approach. So they mainly use some default values that are hard-coded within the source code. And we also inspected those. And these are the results. So the first 3 rows in this graph are the deprecated groups. And as you can see, there's still a lot of stuff going on. So the operators still use these groups, although they are deprecated, especially the 1024-bit prime group that also was used by my home operator is very, in heavy usage still. So my operator was not just one bad apple, but it's a repeating pattern for many other operators as well. Yeah, let's go to the second step. So this is very similar also to the configuration files. Every operator, or every manufacturer, every device handles the IPsec client differently. So they use different implementations for the IPsec client. And for example, Qualcomm chipsets or Qualcomm phones with Qualcomm chipsets, they use an implementation that is mostly happening in the baseband, so on the modem side. And other implementations, like other phones, like Samsung phones or MediaTek phones, they use implementations that are more exposed towards the user space or that can happen in the user space. The nice thing is that for reverse engineering, this is very convenient because we can simply hook those binaries using Frida, or also we could do some traffic captures on the corresponding voice over LT or voice over Wi-Fi interfaces. So if you're interested in doing some reverse engineering of voice over LTE or voice over Wi-Fi, you might want to use a Samsung or MediaTek-based phone. But for this topic, we mainly focused on downgrade attacks that are possible within this IPsec client and within the voice over Wi-Fi connection. And these are the results. So we've got an example here on the left-hand side. This is a handshake procedure where the client supports Diffie-Hellman group 2 and 14. And to save round trips, it also kind of prefers one group and initiates the handshake or the key exchange using this key exchange method. So in this case, it uses and prefers the securer group. So Diffie-Hellman group 14, which is the 2048-bit group. And what could happen in practice is, of course, that the target operator would not support Diffie-Hellman group 14. So the protocol defines one packet that is called invalid key exchange payload packet that the server could use to change to another Diffie-Hellman key exchange. And then the client would discard its current state and it would simply start over and respect the server's choice. So in this case, it still supports Diffie-Hellman group 2 and 14, but it prefers Diffie-Hellman group 2. So they would continue using Diffie-Hellman group 2 in this case. What, however, could happen in practice is that a malicious interceptor or anybody sitting between the UE and the EPDG could, of course, spoof this kind of packet and could then downgrade the security of this connection. So in this case, the Diffie-Hellman group 2 preference packet, the invalid key exchange packet, could be spoofed, and then they would simply use this key exchange group. Of course, this also depends on the server settings, so it could be mitigated by servers always demanding for the strongest group. However, our server-side measurements, they showed that 41% of the servers, they tolerated this weak preference. So for them, this attack was still feasible and possible. We also detected or found a second downgrade vulnerability. This was only present on MediaTek clients, and this was more severe than the first one because this is more or less a protocol extension. So it's not a vulnerability, although it could be exploited. But this one clearly is a vulnerability. So in this case, for MediaTek clients, they kind of forgot to also check whether the key exchange group that is requested within this invalid key exchange packet was also part of the initial proposal. So in this case, the client at the first line, it just supports Diffie-Hellman group 14, and it initiates the key exchange using this group. But then an interceptor could simply spoof this Diffie-Hellman key exchange 1 group, and they would continue using this group. So the client does not check whether Diffie-Hellman group 1 is actually allowed or not. And of course, like an attacker could always use this to downgrade to the weakest group. So for example, to Diffie-Hellman group 1, 768-bit prime, that is deprecated or this actually was never used to be used in the telco world. Of course, the server side needs also to support this key exchange group. And let's take a look at whether they do this or not. So the goal for our server-side scans, it was pretty much the same as for our client-side scans. So we wanted to find out which groups, which Diffie-Hellman groups are supported by EPDG servers, and also how do EPDGs react if clients would prefer weaker than the necessary groups, because many things depend on the behavior of the server here. So we took a look at how this connection procedure is going, and what your smartphone does when you turn on voice over Wi-Fi is it uses this pattern here, this EPDG pattern, and it uses the MCC and MNC of the current operator. It fills out this pattern, and it would then resolve this IP address, or this domain to an IP address. So you could simply try it out with your own operator's IDs and see which IP address your target operator is using for the EPDG server. And then as a second step, you actually have to do the handshake. And for this, we re-implemented the IK handshake with a Python script using Scapy. And here comes the result. So For the domain resolution, we actually found 423 domains, and 275 were responding to our probing. And again, we see the same picture basically as on the client side. So the deprecated key exchange group, Diffie-Hellman 2, 1024-bit prime, is the most popular one. So it's, and also like the one that was never specified for the telco world, Diffie-Hellman group 1, is also supported by 40% of the servers. Yeah, this is not very good. Yeah, regarding the weaker than necessary Diffie-Hellman groups, yeah, as already mentioned before, like 41% of the MNOs accepted less secure methods. So this is not ideal. 12% returned without any specific error. 40% actually behaved correctly. So they decided an upgrade to a stronger group. And for the last 4%, we do not actually know what was going on there, because they actually requested a downgrade to Diffie-Hellman 1 again, so to the weakest group. So this is a little bit strange. Maybe this potentially this could be a panic mode and throw away all security principles and make it work at all costs. So yeah, but that's what happens. And now comes maybe the most interesting part of the talk. So although I'm using Linux and I'm a Linux guy, I actually have to say thank you to Microsoft, because I was using Visual Studio Code when inspecting the server-side scans, the log files of our scans. And I was clicking on the key exchange value of one operator, and suddenly I noticed that it reappears in this file. So it gets highlighted in other rows as well. And this is a very strange thing to happen, and we'll now see what implications this actually has.
Okay, so I promise this is the only slide with formulas on it, but we'll have to dig a little bit into how Diffie-Hellman key exchange work. Actually, just the first step. So the Diffie-Hellman group defines the public prime number P and then the public integer G. So that's in the Diffie-Hellman group. Alice transmits its public key over the wire. How is it generated? Well, we have this formula. If we rearrange that, you can see that if P and G is static and capital A is static, the only variable left is lowercase a, the private key, and that can't be variable then as well. So this means that all these operators were using round-robin style 10 public keys all over again, and this means they all had the same 10 private keys. So we had 16 operators worldwide, all using the same private keys. That's kind of defeat the purpose. Like, there are two things private keys should adhere to. First, they should be random, and second, they should be private. And none of them that is given here. So, kind of a big puzzle for us. As I said, we found 16 operators on 3 continents with roughly estimated 140 million subscribers. And after some digging, after doing some showdown scans and reading press releases, it became clear they all used core network equipment from ZTE. So what to do with that? Well, basically, we have 2 responsible disclosures to do. And so end of February, beginning of March, we had those 2 responsible disclosures, one to MediaTek and one to ZTE via the GSMA. And they couldn't be more different. So MediaTek was super fast in answering our emails, but super scarce with all the details. All that we know, actually we know only after the official blog post came out. We know, for example, that MediaTek used strong SWAN on older models, but switched to a own implementation or to a different implementation for the newer chips, for the 5G chips. Only like last week, we got to know that it's actually their own implementation. So because we asked them, well, is this an error that we should upstream to a different project? Okay. Completely different thing was the responsible disclosure with ZTE, which we did over the GSMA, which also informed all the operators. They were very slow in responding, but we got much more information out of them. So for example, their explanation for this hard-coded 10 keys is that those are leftovers from integration testing. With some passive DNS scans, we determined that that the oldest EPGG server started somewhere in 2016, and ZTE confirmed that this error was present since the very first version, so for at least or something like around 8 years. We have here a list of all the operators, and since we already had the scanning infrastructure, we just kept them going once a day. Once a day, we rescanned all the operators, and we were able to plot this nice graph on how long it took for the operators to patch their systems. And it's steadily going down until it suddenly didn't, because a new operator in Pakistan popped suddenly up as being vulnerable, and again using this static keys. So we got in touch with ZTE, and they explained, well, it's a test setup, it's not in production now, but before it goes into production, they will patch it. And so by end of May, we were down to 0 vulnerable operators, and we could like pat ourselves and say, well, we changed the world for a better place, and we forgot about that. And the scripts, the cron job just still ran once a day. And a few weeks ago, we looked into the data, and we realized there are new operators popping up with the same vulnerability. And so no names here, because this is still under responsible disclosure with GSMA. There's one limitation to our work. We did all our scans from Austria, but as it turns out, operators engage in geo-blocking pretty heavily, because voice over Wi-Fi is also a good tool to dodge roaming fees. So we have another paper on looking at those limitations on the geo-blocking practices of operators. Black Hat asked us to boil down 3 takeaways. So let's start with the first one. Always remove code. So in the MediaTek case, they apparently just yanked out the unwanted key exchange methods from their handshake, but never removed the code. So it was still accessible, and an attacker could trigger the old code in there. So hackers will eventually find it. Always remove that code. Use code inspection tools, code covering tools. If something doesn't show up in your test coverage, it better take a look if it's actually needed. The second thing is we need deprecation paths built into our cryptographic standards. So just because the 3GPP standard declared a method as deprecated, it doesn't mean that it was erased from the world. On the contrary, if you look at this CIA triangle with confidentiality, integrity, and availability, availability always wins, because that's what generates revenue. And so the operators will hesitate to actually remove those old cryptographic protocols or key exchange methods or shorter key lengths, because they don't know how many clients were able to upgrade. But, and so this is like a reoccurring theme that we see all over again. However, we actually know how fast computing power increases over time. We have we have Moore's law, we have observations, and we actually could build a deprecation path into those protocols right from the beginning, so that it's clear that at some point in the future, those shorter key lengths will not be supported anymore. We don't have to do this dynamically as it is in Bitcoin, where it constantly measures the hash rate and then adjusts the puzzle strength. But just as an estimation, we know roughly from experience when we need to switch to longer keys. And the third thing is key freshness. That's why the stinky fish here. For 8 years, even the most primitive statistic analysis on the phone or on the client would have revealed that those keys aren't fresh. There are cryptographic protocols where the client and the server actually can ensure algorithmically and that newly generated keys or random numbers are actually fresh, and they can verify each other. But even like very simple statistical tests would have revealed that, and that could be implemented on a client itself. So all this, this work that we presented now comes from 3 papers. So that's all in that URL there on GitHub. We also have the tools there. So there is the tool for decompiling and decrypting the Qualcomm configurations, as well as a tool written in with Scapi, where you can test your own home network operator if it still uses those vulnerable keys. Since we have like 3 more minutes, I have one bonus anecdote. So it actually turned out harder than expected to do the responsible disclosure, because spam filters got really aggressive. So when we reported all these vulnerable network operators with their ePDG servers, current state of the art for many spam filters is to try to resolve whatever looks like a DNS name in the text. And if that IP address is on a block list, as with some Southeast Asian operators, then they block that email. So we actually had to disguise those DNS names or switch to a different email account for that. So thanks a lot, and I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. We're happy to take them. I forgot to mention, so the MediaTek vulnerability was, the fix for that was deployed, I think, in May or June with the Android security update, so you don't have to throw away your old MediaTek phones.
Unless you're out of support, then you're screwed.
Okay, then thanks a lot, and we are still around for 7 minutes.